Recording.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Susan. So I would like to, so it is June 28th, and I will call the meeting of the Narragansett School District Regional Agreement Amendment Committee. It is 5:09. The first thing I do want to announce that I will be on my phone just because I'm having some technical difficulties. Okay. With that, I know that to start the meeting, I know that Susan did send an email out earlier. We don't have meeting minutes to review tonight.
That is correct.
Yep. So I apologize. I am getting going. Actually, you know what I am going to do? I don't have it. I don't have the agenda right in front of me yet. So I am just going to, if we want to just kick off with Mac and Jay, if you guys want to kick it off. I do have one other thing, one question that came up from the last meeting, but I want to pull that together. So if you guys want to start it off, we can do that.
Okay.
Okay?
Very good.
Okay.
So Mac's going to call up a document here. Right. So this was sent out to everybody. I'm not going to read it, but the reasoning here was to summarize the things that have received tentative approval, preliminary approval. Talks a little bit at the beginning about how we adopted that provision as a way to work through the issues, and that it's going well. So it lists there in section 1B an area of approval, preliminary approval, and 1B3 again another in the vacancy area. The organization of the committee and changing chairman to chairperson. Language regarding buildings and authorization to lease, that was updated, and we did increase the price of repairs that triggers the town payment as opposed to the district payment from $5,000 to $15,000. And in section 5, tentative approval about the first section in the budget, where a lot of that language, Mac talked about it last time, is taken from the statute. So the other reason for writing this up was to be clear about it is attendance. We don't want a situation where we work our way through the whole document and have a lot of preliminary approvals in place, and then we have members who haven't been able to attend show up and ask questions about material that's already been covered. So this is really just a hopefully a cheerful, positive reminder that we need really good attendance as we continue to work through the document. I think, Susan, correct me if I'm wrong, do we have 8 members out of 13 here today? We have Carter, Tim, Linda, Anne Marie, Christine, Hank, Sheila, and Jeff, right? I can't hear you.
Sorry about that. Anne Marie is not a voting member.
Oh, that's what was throwing me
So
off.
I have Tim, Hank, Carter, Sheila, Jeff, Lise, Linda, and Christine Bennett are here right now.
Yeah, that was what was throwing me off. I thought there were 8. So the other thing about that is that, did I read that Kevin Flynn has to be replaced? Is that correct?
We're waiting for the final word on that.
And then is Amy Guthrie going to be replaced?
Amy Guthrie has been replaced by Matthew Rivard. We've been notified by the town of Templeton at the next school committee meeting. He will be appointed by the school committee.
Thank you. So
I did let him know that he could attend this meeting. He just wouldn't be a voting member as of yet, but I've shared the information with him so he can kind of get up, caught up on things. And
Sure. So we got 7 out of 13, and admittedly, there are a couple of changes in membership, but if we can get 9, 10, 11, 12 people at subsequent meetings, I think it would really help as we get towards the end of the process and we start to talk about section by section about the final approvals. So we just don't want people to be surprised as we get towards the latter part of the process. And that's really what this is about, just summarizing what we've accomplished and encouraging folks to jump into these meetings and try to make the effort on that hour and a half that we need from everybody. So that basically covers that memo. And Mac, you can go, I think we go into the regional agreement now.
Yes.
Okay, so this is a continuation of our, really, we've talked about this for several meetings. And I think most of you remember this, so I'm not gonna go back and summarize it in detail, but it's about votes that require a supermajority. And we offered or put on the table the suggestion that some votes could be identified as supermajority votes. And sometimes that's been helpful in regions where there is a big town and a small town. And it encourages everybody to work together. It, to some degree, empowers the smaller town. I don't know if that's the right word, empower, but it helps balance things. So I see your question, Carter, but let me just get through this a little bit. And so we narrowed a longer list down to this. And we're hoping to make progress with this today, to be frank. So it's voting on an amendment to the agreement, incurring debt, the contract with the superintendent, which is obviously a key task of any school committee, reconfiguring grades, closing a school, and leasing. So there is a way to probably pare this down a bit more. I think there's maybe 3 or 4 of these things that are more fundamental than all 6, but this is what we'd like to discuss tonight. So Carter, I think you've got your hand up.
I guess my question, going back to Mr. Flynn's presentation on this matter, wasn't the larger issue that he wanted the matters to have a vote from one representative of each community as opposed to the size of the vote, if I recall correctly?
Yes, so this is about approval votes from members from each town. So it could be 1, yes. And I think the other point that Kevin made, that for what it's worth, that I liked a lot, is that if there are provisions in the amended agreement that help sell it in plain language, that appeal to the voters in each town, and that help the document get recognized as an upgrade and something that's a little bit more reasonable and fair than the previous one.
Yes.
So I don't know who to go back to. Carter, I think you've got your hand up.
I mean, this does not say, it says a 2/3 vote. So let's say, for instance, there was a change in the number of school committee members such that it was 9 and 6 and 3. That would not create the need for a vote from each town. If that is the desire of the committee to have a vote required from each town, would it not be better to state it than to rely upon some mathematical formula based upon the current configuration of the district?
Can I respond there, Jay?
Yeah, go ahead, Mac.
Couple of points there. First of all, the number of people in the school committee cannot be changed unless that's done with this regional agreement. And there's no consideration for that. The second thing is, that's what we originally had and put before you, a simple 1 sentence saying that every vote would require a vote from each community. And your group decided that you didn't want to have that and would rather look at something like this with several specific votes that would take a 2/3 majority. So that obviously is still, I guess, could be on the table, but that's what we started with.
But Mac, it could also be worded that these are votes that require at
Yes,
least
sure.
1 approval vote from a member in each community.
Right.
It could be expressed that way.
Sure.
Yep. Other comments on this?
I would appreciate having it in there as well. If we can work these two ideas together, I think that that would be beneficial to getting it passed.
Okay. Do people like do people like the idea of expressing this not in a 2/3 vote, but in a, that it must be an approval vote from at least one member in each community? Is that more appealing?
That works for me.
Linda has her hand up. Carter is nodding. Linda?
I think both is better.
What do you, I'm not sure I follow that. What do you mean by both?
Use the language of the 2/3, but also a rep from each town has to be included in that vote.
Yeah,
Yep.
Is that looking okay? 2/3, okay. And then I guess the other thing I wanted to ask here is there are 6 items there. Do people want to keep all of those 6 items, or do you want to talk about paring that down even more? Just to sort of throw a couple of thoughts out here. Amending the regional agreement is something that I think that's a strong point to include, as well as debt and the superintendent. If there's 1 or 2 that you might want to pare down, it might be about the leasing and it might be about grade configuration, but also closing school I think should stay if you're going to go with this model. But there is probably a way to get to 4 rather than 6 if that appeals to people. And if not, you can leave it the way it is. We could ask for a vote on preliminary approval with these 6, and we're going to revisit it when we do a final run through of the document anyway. Sheila.
Oh, go ahead. I didn't see Sheila.
I
saw
just
Susan's screen.
wanted to say, with the language that you just added about at least 1 vote from each member town, shouldn't it be at least 1 yes vote from each member town, not just 1 vote?
Yeah, one vote of approval, right?
Right.
So we're very clear and specific. Yeah, vote of approval.
good suggestion.
And Sheila has her hand up and Carter has his hand up. Sheila, do you want to go first?
Sorry, I didn't take mine down.
Okay, Carter.
If you're looking to pare the list, frankly, I think closing the school can come off, because by reconfiguring grades within the building, that quite conceivably could mean the school closure. They are duplicative to some extent, potentially.
Well, yes and no. I mean, the closing school thing is, the way I look at that is it's really a provision for the future. You know, the document's written with the future, with the long-term future in mind, and it does have a way sometimes of reassuring people. Yeah. Any other comments?
Jay, if I could scroll a little bit ahead, I believe that the school committee has to have a 2/3 vote to incur debt anyway. So if that's the case, that might not be necessary there, although it does require at least 1 vote of approval from each member town, so maybe that's okay.
Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any other hands raised, so we'll leave the list. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I don't see where the raise hand button is on my screen. I apologize. I'm looking
That's all right.
around.
Go ahead, Christine. Go ahead.
Just in the first highlighted line, this says 7 votes requiring supermajority. So do we want to correct that to 6 before we move on? If we're leaving all 6? Or is that section 7? And that was just a coincidence.
Yeah, I don't think you need the number 7 there, Mac.
Well, it's
Oh, it is. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I just saw that now.
It's the next section.
Okay.
Just unfortunate the way it read in my head, I guess. Sorry.
All right. Any other questions or comments?
Jay, in the interest of whittling it down, I think we can take the last line out to leave and renew leases for land or building. I mean, I'd like to suggest that we do that, and I'll open that up to anybody else. And who is that? Is that I can't see who it is. Is it Linda? Somebody has their hand raised.
Yeah, Linda has her
Go ahead,
hand up.
Linda.
Yeah. Could you move the 7 just so that it doesn't confuse people 50 years from now? And I like the lease and renew. I like the list that you have. It's really good.
You could, okay. Yeah, well, I was going to suggest you hit the enter key, make that a new line. But anyway,
That's my plan.
okay. Any other thoughts on the list as it stands, or whether you want to edit it? So we have an idea to take out the lease provision. We have an idea to keep it in. Any other comments?
I'll fix this so it looks okay.
Okay. Linda, do you still have a question?
No, sorry.
That's okay. Jeff, I don't know how you want to proceed. Do you want to call for a preliminary approval vote here, or do you want to talk some more about the leasing language?
I'm not hearing any other discussion, Jay. You know what? I will put it in for a motion and just put it up there. Why don't we? We can take a vote on it. I'm not held strong to it, but why don't we do that? So I will make a motion that we, remove the last line to lease and renew leases for land and building for educational purposes, and I will see if we get a second.
Second,
Okay, there we go. So why don't we? So with that said, why don't we take a formal roll call then? Okay.
Okay.
The other thing too, before I take the vote, I do just want to mention that Katrina Bowmill did enter the meeting at 5:15. Okay, so I just want to get that on record. Okay.
Thank you.
And so we will start with the vote. So I'm going to start with Sheila.
No.
Okay. So let me just say so that is a no to leave the language in there, Sheila.
It's a no to striking the lease and renew leases. I think that should stay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Okay. So all right.
So a yes
So,
is to delete it and no is to keep it, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
That is the way I am getting it back. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Katrina.
No.
Tim.
Yes.
Carter.
yes.
Christine.
No.
One second. Linda.
No.
Mr. Marks says yes, and Hank.
Aye.
That's a pretty
Yeah,
close
well,
vote. What did that come out to, Susan?
4-4, I think.
4-4.
Doesn't pass.
That means it doesn't work, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Jeff, do you want to go with a motion to approve it as is?
Yes. Yes. So that's fine. Yes. So I will make a motion to approve the language in quorum number 6 there, the last line to actually the whole thing to approve it as written. And we will take another vote. And Sheila.
Yes.
Tim.
We need a second on that before we take the vote.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Oh.
Sue. Thank you. Thank
I'll
you,
se-
Susan. Yep.
I'll-
So before I start,
I'll
that, can I
second.
get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
Sheila.
And Sheila, your vote?
Yes.
Katrina?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
Carter?
Yes,
Christine?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
Hank?
Aye.
And Mr. Mark says yes, so that's unanimous. So it's going to stay as
Okay.
written. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate the deliberation. So I think this goes back to Mac and we start to pursue the remaining budget language.
Right, so we did, so you did approve section 5, which is the budget. So now, and we did go through the apportionment and the debt, but I want to go through that again. And hopefully we can come to consensus on this. So in the budget has to be broken up into 3 categories: operating costs, transportation costs, and capital debt. So that's just the way the state does it. And operating costs are pretty much, as it says, day-to-day operation, but excluding transportation and the capital debt costs. Transportation costs are the costs of transporting students to and from your schools. The capital and debt costs are for capital outlay, principal interest on the bonds. And as you can see, that's all in black letters, so nothing was changed in that section at all from what you have now. And please feel free to stop me as we go along here if you have a question. If I don't see you, Jay or Jeff or anybody, just speak up and let me know. So all this in red, there's new letters, but new language, but it really, as Jay said at the beginning, is not a change from what you're doing. It's just really denoting what you do and what the law says you need to do. So portioning the costs, first look at operating costs, and your operating costs are apportioned both from what your minimum local contribution, which each of your towns is required to pay from the state, and then whatever is above the minimum local contribution that you split 90-10 or based on your student population. So here's the formula that it works for the state. So you start with your operating budget. You subtract whatever you get in Chapter 78. Then you subtract with what the total amount of minimum local required contributions that each of your town has, and subtract any other local revenue, and whatever's left is the above minimum contribution. So I was trying to think of an example to make it simple for myself at least. So let's say your operating budget is $100. And let's say you get $40 in Chapter 70 money. And then let's say you get, you were required, both towns are required to pay a total of $35 for your minimum contribution. And there's some other general revenue of another $5. So if I've done this right, that all adds up to $80 out of your $100 budget. So the $20 is what's above, what's left to be assessed to the 2 towns that's above what you have to do. And that $20 is divided between the 2 towns based on student enrollment. So basically that $20 is going to be split 90-10. So does that example make sense, or did that confuse you more? Okay. Hopefully. So number 3, it just says the above minimum, again, is based on student enrollment. Assessing transportation costs, again, that's totally based on student enrollment between your 2 towns.
Mac, I do have a question on the transportation.
Oh, okay.
Are we ever going to see the 100% reimbursement that's specified by the MGL?
Yeah.
I know it's a great question.
Yeah,
Ask Susie Whips.
that certainly would be nice. It's, in my time, it's gone down as low as into the 50%, got up into almost 90 at one point, and now it's in the 70s, I believe.
I think that question is in the same basket as the which came first, the chicken or the egg. It's one for the ages, I suspect.
Yeah. The legislature did try to pin it down a little bit, saying that they couldn't fiddle with that number easily, but there's still an opportunity for them to fiddle with it. But so hopefully it'll stay at least in the 70s. The capital costs.
I do know Senator Comerford from the western part of the state is really beating the drum. And I have had conversations with Representative Whips and Senator Goby on this, just to ask for assistance because we're all crunched up together.
The state has taken away some of the incentives for regionalization that existed 30 years ago. And this would seem to be a simple one. If you want towns to get together, you got to help them get their kids into one spot. That just seems like a no-brainer, but anyway, your capital costs are also divided up by your student enrollment. And as we've talked about before, that's the capital costs are divided up on your district-owned building. So your secondary school, it's divided that, and as Jay mentioned before, the town-owned school, the elementary school that you have, that is assumed by the town that has the building, anything over $15,000. And this is a little bit, this is different in different, this number 2 here. Sometimes schools, regional agreements will say that whenever the debt is assumed, even if it's for 20 years, whatever the split of population is on that date, that stays the same, so that each school district can count on that. No matter what their school population does, they know that that's the amount they have to pay each year. But more and more, they're doing it on changing it annually based on your enrollment. So if your enrollment changes from 90-10 to 89-11 in the second year of a debt payment, then the amount of payment for that debt would change by each of the communities. So it seems like a fair way to go is, you know, if one of your towns, your smaller town went to 15% all of a sudden, and the other went to 85, it certainly wouldn't be fair to keep them at 10% for all those years. So anyway.
Would it be wise to set a specific date that we would go by? Like, I know the superintendent always uses October 1st as the year that's going to be the figure for that year, even if it does change subsequently. Should we set a date that we would go by?
We could, to say that would be probably based on the previous year's October 1st.
Right.
Is that something that other people would be interested in?
Mac, I have a question.
Sure.
If Anne Marie is still in the meeting, is there how does it work now? Is this the way it works now? If you have it, do you have any capital debt for both towns or not? Is she here?
We don't have any capital debt right now.
Okay. But if you did, Anne Marie, how is it calculated?
It was just divided by the percentages for each year.
The enrollment percentages?
Yeah.
And did you use October 1 numbers?
Yes.
Okay, so it wouldn't, so it would make some sense to put in the October 1 number. Okay.
I'll work on the language here.
Yep.
Oops, that doesn't look too good.
Certainly highlights it. There you go.
All right, I'll work on that. So the total assessment, as I'm sure you all know, for each of the town, when you add up what you have to pay for a minimum local contribution that the state sets for you, the above minimum, your 90 or 10% of the local, of the above minimum contribution, plus the transportation costs and the capital costs. That all adds up to your total assessment each year. So, any thoughts about that? Again, there's no change. Can you confirm that, Anne Marie, that that's what you've been doing forever?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so is there any ability that can we vote to accept this section on apportionment of costs?
We have substantial questions and concerns.
All right, let's talk about them.
So the document that I'm looking at in section 6C throughout the document does not consistently refer to capital and debt costs. In some place, it talks about capital. In other places, it talks about capital and debt as used in B. And we think that that just needs to be fully vetted and consistent throughout the sections.
In this version, they're not always together?
Nope. Not in the version I'm looking at.
So are you referring, Carter, to the forward slash?
Yes.
Okay. And do you have a preference for how it's expressed?
Only that it be consistent.
Okay.
All right, I'll make sure that that's the same. Okay.
So in section C, it refers to the original school plan. What is the original school plan? It's not defined in any fashion.
I'm not sure what you're looking at. Are you looking at the current regional agreement?
No, I'm looking at, well, I may have a bad version. I'm working with one that council sent me. We sent this to council to look at. Bond council's not had an opportunity to look at it yet, which is our concern. We would prefer an opportunity for bond council to look at this to ensure that there's no negative impact upon currently issued or to be issued debt that's coming up in February of next year.
Carter, can I ask a question? When did you pull that the document out? Do you know which version you're working off of? When did you pull it out and send it?
I pulled it off of what Sue sent out last week.
Okay, all right. So it should be fairly up to date if it was the one from last week.
That's what I sent our council. Yes, Jeff.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Carter. Thanks for clarifying.
This should be the same document that Susan sent out. It's just that I highlighted my copy of it. So I'm not sure where you're getting that.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the same thing. I printed the one she sent earlier today. Because there's a C, capital debt costs, and you just had up there was also a section D, and that's where some of the question was coming from. Stop right there. Mine shows C, that D does not exist, but that line 6 in the item D on yours is where we're questioning the original school plant and any subsequent additions.
Okay.
That's the language that's raising the question.
Okay.
It's not defined at all in any fashion.
So are you really talking about how to define capital costs?
Well, yes, particularly when you refer to that it will be for the original school plant. What is the original school plant?
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
now I see what you're getting at here.
So the other thing is, you're talking about evidence of indebtedness issued by Templeton or Phillipston. Frankly, we think it would be forward-looking to say member towns. Otherwise, should you add a member town, you've got to remember to go back in and change that section as well. So we have some concerns about this whole debt section.
That's an easy one if people are okay with that. So that, and then either.
Matt, can I make a comment here?
Sure.
So the text that's in black comes from the original, the old, I should say, regional agreement,
The current one, yes.
current one, right? And so this agreement has if I understand Carter correctly, it has kind of some components to it, to the definition of capital costs that are a little bit outdated, and some wording that's a little outdated. So one thing, I'm just throwing this out there, one of the ways that you can also define capital costs is by citing the language from the Department of Revenue. And it makes it pretty clear. I've done that in some other regional agreements, but if you want to keep what you have and just kind of amend it, you can also do that.
Other activities, incentive.
Can I just ask a question quick? I'm looking at
Yes.
the document that you shared, the regional agreement amended. It's the PDF that I have in the folder that you guys sent. And I just pulled it up just to look and compare it to what you guys are doing right now. And it appears that the bottoms of most of the pages are cut off. You can see the language.
In the PDF or in the one we're looking at?
The PDF.
And so if I might jump back in section 6 that I'm looking at, C, it talks about the schools specified in subsection 3B, but that's no longer where the leased schools are.
Yeah, well, that's. Where is
Correct.
that? Carter, where are you seeing that?
Again, to Jeff's point, I want to make sure I haven't somehow, muddied the waters by grabbing the wrong version here. But if I look at the amended 21-06-28,
Right.
21 parens 17, in the new section 6 in A, it talks about costs shall be divided into 2-3 categories. The 2 isn't struck through, it's still there in blue. I certainly think the intent was to strike it.
It is, there is a strike through there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in C, if you read the last line, it talks about in connection with the schools specified in subsection 3B, which is a carryover from the current. And I don't believe the schools are there any longer.
That's section D, right?
C.
No,
C.
What you have on the
It's-
screen, it is D. What I have that I printed, it is C.
Yeah,
That red item in
Yeah.
C no longer exists. So this is all askew, and the PDF versus this aren't even jiving right now. This is extremely confusing.
Yeah.
No, it's,
if I can share my screen quick, I can show you, but it's it looks like C and D are reversed because in the PDF, D is transportation.
Yep.
And C is capital debt costs shall include.
Okay, so
Oh,
we're looking at different documents.
no, you know what? That's my fault. I did change that because I was trying to keep everything consistent. If you go to the back to the top of this, it talks about operating costs, transportation second, and capital debt third. So I did switch those so that it's operating costs, transportation, and D is capital debt, just so that it's consistent with the top.
It's okay.
Category.
Right, but then we go to E, which is apportionment of costs, and then we go to back to D, apportionment of capital and debt costs. Had you switched that also?
No, E is apportionment of operating costs,
Yep,
F is transportation costs, and G is capital debt costs.
it's
The same
E in
order.
what I'm looking at.
Okay, and that's my fault. On this version, I changed those to keep things in the right order. But the wording hasn't changed. I'm sorry, that's just, it may be it is in a different order, and I apologize for that, but I didn't change any, all the wording is the same as what you have.
And the new language makes a distinction between capital costs for the future and current obligations. That's different from the original document. Why are we making that distinction? Is it because there's no currently, you believe, any debt owed by the district?
Where is that language, Carter?
It's in, again, I believe I may be confusing you a touch because of the way the PDF has been altered. But it's in D, apportionment of capital/debt costs.
Can you move up, Mac?
You actually want to scroll down to the next page.
The G,
Is it my D or your D?
Keep,
your G is the new one on the screen.
yep. Right there. Yep.
Okay. Okay, now that I'm seeing that, Carter, could you express your issue again, please?
Well, the current agreement doesn't make a distinction between the kinds of capital and debt. If it's owed, it's owed. And this new language appears to make a distinction. And it also talks about the October 1 next preceding the first day of the fiscal year. And we think that the word next is confusing. It's October 1 preceding the first day of the fiscal year. So we just think there's some language issues here.
Well, next means it has to be the one closest to it. If you don't say next, it could be any October 1st preceding the first day.
Well,
I think that's why it's there. We can.
I would say, no, next means the one that's going to occur in the future. I would say it's the October 1 immediately preceding the first day of the fiscal year would be more accurate.
No.
Or October 1 of the current fiscal year.
All right, well, look at that.
It wouldn't be current though. It has to be the one before.
Right. It's the October 1 immediately preceding the first day of the coming fiscal year for which the apportionment is to be determined.
How about if we change next to immediately? I think that's maybe a good suggestion.
For the moment, I personally could live with that if everyone else can.
Yeah.
I mean, Jeff, if I might, what I would like to suggest is that they take these concerns that we have with respect to some of the typographical errors, the revision of the numbering of the paragraphs, and they recast this and send it back out, and then we can run it by bond counsel. But from our perspective, this is not ready for prime time.
Yeah.
Jay, do you understand Carter's original? I don't think I have my head around what he was originally talking about. Do you understand his concern?
Not completely, but I do. I am kind of thinking that the section here. Can you scroll up?
I mean, this is really, quite a bit of the existing language has been removed, and we're not understanding why it needs to be removed. This is a substantial rework, in our opinion.
So the first section here talks about the 3 categories, correct?
Yes.
And is that maybe you would just help to sort of, is it all of section 6 that you'd like to see sort of cleaned up here, Carter? Is that it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to ask you, we can do that. What I was going to ask you though, you want to run this by bond counsel previous to the document being reviewed by town council before it's approved anyway.
Well, it's been reviewed by council at this moment. They have substantial concerns over why there are so many changes, the inconsistency in some areas, and the questions that we've raised here today. So our thought is to ask you to, and you've already begun to reorganize it to some degree
Right.
for flow. We've identified some typographical errors. We've identified some word issues and some concerns over concepts. It would be my request that you recast the document with all those things in mind, get it out as quickly as possible, and we'll submit it to bond counsel before there's a preliminary vote on it. I would hate to see this committee take a preliminary vote on this section. And then at some point in the future, we submit it to bond counsel and they come back waving red flags over something. And the committee, you know, faced with a, well, wait a minute, we already voted on this.
Right. So just, if that's the will of the committee, then, you know, speaking for myself, I'm willing to accommodate that. The only thing I was going to say, though, is be aware that when there is a legal review of the entire document, it's not unusual to have some edits done.
Yeah.
This, in our opinion, is the most substantially revised section in the entire document.
Okay.
We're not talking about a little bit of wordsmithing or a recent court decision or piece of legislation where a council says, oh, wait a minute, 45 days ago, the legislature passed ABC and you guys didn't know about it, and so we have to adjust it.
Yeah.
We think that this could be in everyone's best interest for it to have an earlier review rather than at the end of the day, final edit review. At least that's our.
I would just request, Carter, that who's ever reviewing this and wants to compare it to what is in the current document, to just look at to see if it really looks like there are any changes. I think you'll find that it's just cleaning things up, and
it's with due respect, it's far beyond that.
Okay, but so I would like to know if you can have people tell us what is changed, what is different about this wording compared to what you have. What is the outcome that would be different? That's what we need to know.
Well, I mean, with due respect, this is your preferred language, and we'd like to see it, at least from my perspective, all cleaned up and in order.
Sure.
Addressing those initial concerns, and then I think we could lay it out better, because once we see it reorganized and we see how you've addressed those initial concerns, some of council's concerns might just evaporate, and so I don't want to waste your time or their time in any
That's
event.
fine. I think Jay, there's still one issue that you've raised that I don't think we are going to correct, because I don't think I understand. And it's about the original school plan. Can you help me understand what do you think was the original intent of that?
Who are you asking?
Anybody. I'd like to.
I'd like to maybe chime in on that.
Sure.
I'm going to, and we'd have to look at probably the previous agreements. They came before this one, but I'm going to throw it out there that maybe, because we're sitting in the middle high school, and the original section was built in the 50s, and the high school section is built somewhere in the early 90s. I don't know if that's what they were. I don't know if that's what they're referring to, or does it mean that when this agreement any agreement was written, is it referring to what is then the current physical plant if we were going to build on another wing, or I don't know if it's thinking ahead, or if it's or if it's talking specifically about what happened here, because this was 04, so right, 2004, am I right? No.
Yes, well, that's the last one, but I think it was in there before then.
Yeah, so I'm wondering.
Well, it would have to be the original school, I would think, right? And
you
then
know,
it
we'd have
has
to
the-
pull the other documents to see if it was there. Do you know what I'm saying? We'd have to see,
Yeah,
you know.
if it was in the original, it has to be the original, Narragansett.
We will study that. I'm guessing based on this conversation that doesn't even need to be in here.
And I think that's Carter's original point. Correct me if I'm wrong, Carter, but that's his original point, is what exactly does that mean? What is the original school plan? You mean, what is where is that coming from? And if it doesn't need to be in there, then maybe we do need to remove that.
Right. I mean, unless the original agreement said back in the 50s, oh, in PS, we commit to building a new building to be owned by the district, to be known as the original school plan, then we would know what it is. But I think Jeff's right. I think this thing can just come out of there.
We're referring to something that we don't know what it is.
Okay. So
I-
that's the reason.
If you just give me a second, I'm looking at the 1977 version, and I'll see if that's there.
Linda, if you have a question, just go ahead.
Wouldn't this be in minutes or the town records or somewhere? I'm sure there's documentation.
Yeah. I'll look at it later. I don't see it in the 1977 version, but so anyway, we'll look at that.
Mac, before you change your screen,
Yes.
just a few things have jumped out at me staring at here. So at the bottom of page 10, under the there, I think it's supposed to be, the very last line is supposed to be associated, not associates.
Yeah, there's some other typos throughout it also.
And
Yeah,
then
good,
for the
thank you.
change we made just a little while ago about either member town, if you wanted to leave it open for a third town to come in, then should we just say by a member town instead of either, because that's only one of two?
Okay, but again, there would have to be a whole new regional agreement if you had
Right.
another town.
But then it's just less language we'd have to clean up, as Carter had said
no,
before.
Yeah.
And
no, it's-
then scrolling back down, I think the one got deleted from October 1st in that last edit we made down there. The other section after we had done the blue one. Oh, yeah, in paragraph 1, PK 12 district on the October immediately preceding. So it's just, yeah, it's October 1st again there, correct?
It does say that here, right?
So up in the prior paragraph,
Yes.
number 1, the line says enrollment in the PK district on the October immediately preceding, right where your cursor is flashing, actually, that
Right.
line. So does he need to put the 1 back in?
Oh, I see. Okay, yes, thank you. Yep, good. All right, we'll work on it. And this, I'll get a better sentence here. So, fine, Carter, we'll be happy to do that. We'll look at it and we'll also study what is in your current language, and I'll look back on the 77 and 55 versions and see if we can see where that came from. All right.
Mac, can I just suggest to, if you reorganize anything, is there any chance we could just put a note in there so that we know that, so that we'll know that looking at it, if you
Yeah.
reorganize the paragraphs,
Yeah.
that might be helpful, even if it's
Yeah.
just a note or something. If we put something in there just to say, why we changed it or where we changed it to.
Well, if I change it, what should happen is that you should only get the same version. Unfortunately, I did that the day after our last meeting, redid that, and by the time it got sent out to you, I had forgotten that I had done that, so that's my fault.
Okay.
So, right, we'll try to make sure that you have the same version that I do when we go to look at it again.
Thank
So,
you, that's appreciated.
I don't want to complicate things, but if Templeton is going to have bond counsel review the language, is Phillips then okay with that, or do they need somebody to look at it? I think Linda's got a question.
Linda, you have something to say?
Are you guys offering to pay?
No,
No. Hmm.
Yeah, I think we do one review at the end, not several along the way, right?
that's usually what happens.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask because but it's completely likely that the bond counsel that Templeton uses will provide some helpful suggestions for the section.
Okay,
Watch and see, because we have the band coming up for review, and that is definitely a review of that bond.
all right, so shall we tackle the next section? These are the two more difficult issues, I think. So again, this is pretty much taken out of the law book. So you can see here, when I mentioned this before about the 6 categories that might take an extra 2/3 vote. In order to vote to incur debt, the committee does have to vote by 2/3 to do that. So here are the 2 sections that we talked about last time, and there was a debate you had about whether we keep it in there or not. It doesn't have to be in there, but it does clearly tell everybody what the 2 options are when the school committee is going to wants to assume some debt. And section 16D is that they can't, the committee cannot do anything, or at least they have to tell the towns within 7 days. And then within 60 days, the towns have an opportunity to hold a town meeting at which to approve or disapprove of the school committee's request to incur debt. So that's the more typical one. And the 16N under number 2 there is that there is a one major election that both towns do on the same day. People go to the polls and vote, and whatever the vote is combining the 2 towns, that is what is either is approved or disapproved based on the total vote of the 2 towns. So in your case, where there's a 90-10 split, I'm sure that most people would be happy to use 16D, which gives both towns the opportunity to turn it down. So
Does that mean each town has to come out with a yes, or the total number of votes is added together?
No, each town would have to come up.
Okay.
There are only 2 votes there, one from each town.
So could we say that in there somehow? So must be approved by the majority of registered voters in each member town, not just the total voters in the towns, because I think that could be ambiguous.
So at the end, and if at that meeting, a majority of voters present and voting express disapproval of the amount authorized by the committee, the debt shall not be incurred. So.
Okay, I'm sorry, I was looking at the next line, the next section. The debt must be approved by a majority of the registered voters in the member towns.
In the member towns.
So it's in each member town.
No.
So
No?
yeah. So
in
that's
number 2, it's both member towns together.
Okay.
It's the total. So if 10 people vote in one town and 9 in the other, or 90 in the other, it's 51 total votes, it passes, or 49 it fails, 50 it fails. So it's two different ways of voting.
yeah. So Mac, may I make a comment?
Sure.
So the option here, so one section is section D is about each town has the authority to approve or not approve. So the smaller town has just as much authority, just as much of a voice in approving or not approving debt as the larger town. In section N, it's a combined election and the majority carries the day. Okay, so section D gives much more voice to small towns. Section N in a way, you could make an argument that it gives much more voice to the larger towns. So,
Yes.
So
so
are we-
if I could, just one more point and I'll stop. So you have the option of choosing one, or you have the option of putting both of them in the agreement and letting the committee decide which one to use.
But I would add, before anybody else, whether you put it in here or not, the school committee has both of those options.
Yeah, that's the law. Yeah.
That's the law.
Is this the correct reference? Because the section of chapter 71, 16D that I'm looking at talks about state aid for construction, not the issuance of debts. I'm feeling very disconnected from the document tonight. My apologies.
I have my law book here. Oh, look.
I'm looking online, so
Oh.
chapter 71, section 16D, the title is aid from the state. And it talks about that the regional school district is entitled to receive state aid for construction of regional schools. And the reimbursement and how that will be calculated and et cetera, et cetera. There's nothing in the online 7116D that refers to the method of submitting to the towns and receiving approval for the issuance of debt. And again, my apologies if I'm just completely disconnected here tonight.
Well, I'm not seeing it quickly, but I've had that citation in my mind for a long time, but I will check on that. Excuse me. 7116 DNN. All right, we'll make sure that's the right citation, but we've used that quite a few times.
So can I just ask, in your experience, how often has it come up that the committee would elect N over D using these references?
So, in all honesty, section N can be disruptive.
I would say so.
Yeah, and there's an instance of that that's playing out in Berkshire County right now. So, yeah, I mean, so it is. It's like when you minimize the voice of the smaller communities, people get upset about that. And so it's in this particular instance, it was about trying to approve debt for a new high school. And it's a large regional district with a lot of small towns. And they used that option to kind of get it through, and it's upset a lot of people. So, you know, the scale of it doesn't have to be a new high school. It can be something smaller than that. But section D is the much more common option. Okay. And it does give each community its voice on the initiative that's being considered. And I would really kind of put that in bold. Section D is much more commonly used.
Right.
So is it your recommendation that we do leave them both in here, or would we have the option to take out and you know, the committee would have to really dig for it if they wanted to push that?
Yeah, it's, as Max said, it's in the law. We can I think, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, what we can do as the committee wishes here. If they just want to have D, they can include that.
I think it would be better to take them both out than to put one in. That's kind of misleading to think that there's only one, because that's just not correct.
Well, isn't the department going to want some provision for incurring debt? Going to have something there.
That's what they've asked us to do. Yes.
Yeah.
Why can we not specify that the two communities wish to have the method that requires a voice for each community? I understand that the statute has the two provisions, but is there any reason that a collaboration of communities cannot say, yes, we understand those are the options, but in entering into this regional agreement, we wish to constrain those options, and here's here's what we're adopting as the framework under which you can operate.
We can check on that. I don't think that we can constrain the school committee, a future school committee, but we can ask that question, Carter.
Well, this is setting a framework, but in the school committee's financial policy, it does not specify anything this deeply defined. So now it comes down to what overrides what, this agreement or the school committee's policy.
Yeah, I would think that that's a good point, Tim. I think the place for that kind of thing, Carter, would be in school committee policy. They could have a policy to agree that that's what they would do. I don't think that probably that's what should happen in a regional agreement, but.
Well, I'm hearing representatives of the two communities that wish to constrain the school district and to not leave them that option.
Right, so we'll check to see if that's legal to do that.
Well, there's also this thing called special legislation.
Well, yeah, well. That,
I'm sensing from Phillipston that they would like to have that option used in the agreement. I might be misreading or mishearing that.
I would agree to somehow state that we prefer 16B, yes, if possible in any way. Thank you.
Yeah, it's one thing to prefer, it's another thing to constrain.
So why don't we check with the department, Mac, and see what's possible
Yeah.
there?
Yeah, we certainly can do that.
I certainly don't want to retake, if I may, or go backwards. I don't want to do that. But I will say that in the 1977 regional school agreement, I'm going back to the whole physical plant piece, the original plant.
Yeah.
And I would just say that in section 4 of apportments of costs incurred by the district, they do go on to say that, you know, acquisition of real estate, construction, improvements of buildings, grading, purchase of equipment, other activities, and it goes into the operation of the original school plant and any subsequent additions and improvements thereto. So I'm wondering if, and I don't remember that to be in the original language, the language we're discussing here, but I in reading this document before, it made sense to me that they were talking about the plan in 77 to probably think about, you know, adding on, but I just want to make sure that I pointed it out. So when you go back to, you know, for reference, that it is in section 4, and it's, you know, it's there. I don't know what page, it says 11 on my PDF document, but just so you know that.
All right, thank you, Chris. We'll look at that.
That's helpful. Thank you.
All right, well, moving right along. Let's see. Lost my cursor, there it is. Again, we added that if the committee is going to authorize debt, they will notify the towns by certified mail, you see there, indicating the general purpose of the debt, and give it to the Board of Selectmen of each of the member towns. And then
so unless that's statutory language, we've used select board in other sections, and Templeton no longer has a Board of Selectmen by ordinance.
all right, so how should we do that then?
I don't know if Phillipston, I would first ask if Phillipston has changed or if they remain a Board of Selectmen.
Board of Selectmen is all I've heard in use, but I'm not sure if there's been anything official. We'll have to check since ours isn't here tonight.
And Carter, yours is called a select board?
It is by bylaw. All references have been changed. And we've actually used elsewhere in this agreement, the phrase select board.
Yeah.
So, you know, in New Hampshire, it would be real simple. We would just say governing body. You know, I don't know. I think they just need to line up because in 9B amendments, it appears that we've struck Board of Selectmen and inserted Select Board in several locations in that section.
Yeah,
So my main concern here is for consistency.
good point.
Linda, do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I've heard it used interchangeably in Phillipston also, and I think other towns use the select board, select men,
It,
select women.
I think we did talk about it earlier in one of the earlier meetings, and I think that's why it might have got changed up above. Sheila, do you have a question?
I agree. It was talked about in an earlier meeting and Phillipston said it would be fine with them to use select board.
Okay,
That's,
that slipped by us there and by me. So we'll make that consistent. C is just talking about when the towns pay after it has been approved. Transportation just talks about you're providing transportation to all students who are enrolled in your K to 12 schools. And that payment again is based on the enrolled students percentage. So any comments about transportation? Pretty straightforward. The reason that this first one is crossed out, it just says provided by the transportation shall be provided. It doesn't say to who. So we have been putting in that's for enrolled students to make it clear who the students are that you're paying for.
Does that
Yes,
include
Mac,
school
if-
choice though, if you use enrolled students?
Pardon me?
Sorry, does that include like school choice kids? If we say enrolled students, does that include school choice?
It's a good point.
You could say
Yeah.
enrolled resident students.
Linda, do you have another question?
Yeah, is that including special ed?
Yes.
It would include special ed, yes.
Yeah, and that special ed has its own obligation.
Right.
But the other reason why this is important is it helps facilitate transportation reimbursement for the district.
That was a good suggestion, adding resident there. All right. Let's see, it's going to be 6:22. Let's see, we might be able to get through amendments here. You can see actually there's almost nothing changed from your current agreement. It's all in black. And just at the end, it says such amendment shall take effect upon its acceptance by each of the member towns to be a majority vote at a town meeting, to make that clear, at such annual or special town meeting and by the commissioner of DESE. They require us to add that to every time there's change like that. So the only thing that's being changed here is saying that it takes a majority vote to do at the town meetings to do an amendment. Any thoughts, comments there? Let's see.
Linda has a question.
Okay, good.
Can you write in there that it will be sent by certified mail, please?
What is sent by certified mail, the amendment?
Yeah,
Be presented to the secretary of the regional school committee who shall mail
Shall
by
mail or deliver a notice in writing to the Board of Selectmen.
to the select board, shall mail or deliver. So shall deliver by,
Mac, we
Yep.
put that language in up above in one of the other articles. We should probably just, for consistency, we should probably just mirror what we have up above.
so if it says who shall deliver by
Certified mail, correct.
certified mail,
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, good point. That's why we have a committee. Let's see, shall deliver. Okay. Any other thoughts there? Maybe let's do one more section, then we can, because withdrawal is a little more complicated. So if we can do the addition, again, the first paragraph is not changed. It says it just has to be done by a majority vote in compliance with state laws. And B is something that the state has asked us to include. It just says that the committee can ask for an additional amount. So let's say a third town is interested in joining your region, and you have just incurred, say you have 10 years left on a debt. You might ask them, if their children are going to come in and be in that school, you would like them to pay a little bit of that back amount of debt to as a way to get into your region. And then obviously from then on, they would be paying whatever their share was. So anyway, that's what B is, just that there might be an additional amount that you need. There maybe wouldn't. You may want another member town that's going to help split the cost of running the region. And so you may invite them in without any additional fee, but it just allows you to if you want to.
With respect, I'm very troubled by this. It's just a black box. There's no methodology. There's no distinction as to what it's for. This is, the Tommy Smothers, because mom liked you best. You got two communities that want in, and you like one more than another. You stiff one with a number. This just to me is, why don't we just open up a phone book and point to a number and say, this is what we want you to pay. I understand the concept, but without any guardrails whatsoever, I don't believe this should be in here.
Could we add just a phrase that says any new member town would pay the same amount or the same proportional amount, so there would be no discrimination between additional towns?
But what are they paying for? You figure out they're going to save 800,000. You figure, well, we can squeeze them for 500,000. I mean, what is this for, and how are you going to determine it? And how is it consistent?
There are a couple of fail safes here. One is if you make it an arbitrary number that isn't good, that town is not going to vote to join you. And secondly, your towns are going to have to vote to amend your regional agreement. And if it doesn't make sense, either one of your towns could vote against it also.
Yeah, I understand Carter's point. I was gonna kind of say what Mac just did, and that is that in either an admission or withdrawal scenario, you're gonna have to do a new regional agreement. And usually that's where the negotiation and the specificity that Carter is speaking to is included. I know that may not answer your question. I just want to make the point that there's a new regional agreement if this occurs.
And I'm not completely understanding, bear with me, why the admission of a new town requires a complete new agreement, because the agreement envisions the additions of towns and then talks about how the costs for member towns are apportioned.
Yeah, no, but the new town isn't in this agreement, Carter.
It's clear that you'd have to have a whole new agreement. I mean, you don't have to change anything else, but also, I don't know if that second sentence there helps at all, but this additional cost will be clearly articulated to the potential new member town or towns and will be made clear to the voters prior to that new member town's vote on admission to the district. So that was another part of the language that DESE asked us to include, to make sure it is said that it's clearly articulated to, I guess we could add to the current member towns too, if that would be helpful. While you're thinking, just in C, the law is clear. If you make an amendment like what we're doing right now, without adding a new member town or excluding a member town, that could be signed, sealed, and delivered at any point, and you could start it right away. But if you add a new member town or you lose a member town, that can only happen if the commissioner signs off on it by December 31st, and then starting on the following July 1st. And I think the theory is that your budget would be totally different at that time. Right now, whatever you do now, it's not going to change your next fiscal year budget. But if you included a third town, obviously the whole budget structure is going to be very different. And that's why they don't want you to decide that on June and start it on July 1st. It's not realistic for the financial people. So I guess we want to just think about that, and next month we'll try to resolve that.
Sure. Would you be able to give us any scenarios at that time of what kinds of additional amounts would be appropriate to add? Like, are there union buy-ins or something like that that would have to be in place, or bus contracts or things like that that would have to be in place before they would actually start paying in on the subsequent July 1st?
Well, whenever they were to enter on that July 1st, they would have had been involved in the budget preparation for the next fiscal year. So even though they are still running their own school district for that fiscal year, they would be participating in your budget presentation for the following fiscal year, and they would pick up their share of all kinds of contracts right away. I think the only time that this might come into play is, again, if there's debt in the current region that you want that new town to help pay because their kids are going to come in. And is it fair if you've been paying for 10 years on that debt and these kids come in and they don't get to pay anything on that, and what you've been to share on what you've been paying over the last 10 years?
If I can, Mac, just real quick.
Sure.
I think, am I frozen, Sue? I can't tell.
Nope, you're fine, Chris.
We can hear you.
Yep, you're good, Chris. Oh, you might have just froze now.
Oh, never mind.
There you are.
Am I here?
Yes.
Yep, you're back. Yep.
Basically, if we do a roof project, which eventually we're going to need to at the middle high school, right? This main building, that would be a great example of something like that, I think. But I'm just using that as a, just one example of, I think, what Mac was talking about.
Right. All right. Well, the hour is past the half hour, so what is your pleasure in terms of how we start next time? First thing, we're going to clean up that language the best we can, get it out to you right away, and hope that you can get some feedback before our next meeting. Is that the plan?
If I can have that within 10 days, we can absolutely commit to that.
Yeah, you'll have it before 10 days, sure. And then we need to keep moving. So we're getting close. Withdrawal is a little bit complicated. That we can take some time on that, and the rest of it is we're almost done if we resolve that. Okay, Jeff, I think that's probably all we should do.
Okay. Okay, so with that, I will take we have no other business, so I will take a motion to adjourn.
So
Well,
moved.
not.
I'll second.
Jeff,
Okay.
before we take the vote, did we agree whether
Yep.
we're going to try to meet in person? Have we pushed that off at the beginning of the meeting?
I believe, my understanding is that we were gonna continue to, meet remotely. Kim, I might have missed something, but that was my understanding. We were gonna continue. Since the order has been, extended, I thought we were gonna continue to meet remotely. Am I mistaken in that?
I think we said we were gonna stay remote through the summer anyways to accommodate vacation schedules and things like that.
Okay.
That sounds right.
We
Is
have,
that-
we have July
you good with that,
26th.
Kim?
Can we confirm that July 26th and August 23rd are the two meetings we're gonna have this summer?
July 26th. You know what? I don't have it right in front of me, Jay.
That's what we agreed to last time, but
Okay.
Yes, that's what we have
Yep.
on the calendar.
Yes. Yep. Okay. So that is correct, Jay. Okay. Excuse me, Mac. I'm sorry.
fine.
So I am going to move forward with the vote to adjourn unless there's nothing else. I see no other questions. So Sheila,
Yes.
Katrina,
Yes.
Tim.
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Christine,
Yes.
Linda,
Yes.
Hank, Hank, you still with me? Is he still here? Do I see him?
I don't see him.
I
on-
don't. I don't believe Mr. Mason is with us. So,
You've dropped.
well, and Mr. Mark says yes. So, we are all set. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Okay,
You have a
thank
good
you,
night.
Jeff. Thanks,
Right.
everybody.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, good night.